Jujutsu Kaisen's power system has a reputation for being complicated, but it's not. It's just poorly explained. New information is thrown in left and right with no real bearing as to what it actually means, or what it means in the context that it's introduced. So let's fix that. We'll be going over everything in cursed energy, from techniques to heavenly restrictions to domains. But before we can understand any of that, we have to understand the basics of cursed energy itself. Cursed energy is essentially the fuel for everything you see in the series. It is needed for cursed techniques, domain, reverse cursed technique, and more. The energy is generated by humans when they experience negative emotions like fear, anger, or sadness. For non-sorcerers, this energy pools with the cursed energy of others to create cursed spirits, which is why places like schools, hospitals, and jails seem to be more susceptible to cursed spirits than most places. For sorcerers, cursed energy is something to be harnessed. By learning to control their emotions, Jujutsu sorcerers increase their control of their own cursed energy. While sorcerers do generate more cursed energy than regular humans, because they are able to control it, the cursed energy leaked from sorcerers is next to nothing, and as such they do not generate cursed spirits. The sorcerers use this harnessed cursed energy for combat, primarily against cursed spirits and curse users, which are people that can use cursed energy but are not part of Jujutsu society. For most sorcerers, using cursed energy for combat means using cursed energy to fuel their cursed technique, but that is not the only application. Cursed energy can be used in its raw form for combat for people that do not have a cursed technique, such as Yuji Itadori, Kusakabe, or Miwa, or for people whose cursed technique is not geared towards offense like Todo or Meimei. A lot of times, people in this position will make use of a cursed tool to bolster their strength. A cursed tool is a weapon that has been imbued with cursed energy over a period of time to make it effective for Jujutsu. This must be done over a few months, or else the cursed tool will suffer damage and potentially break from experiencing too much cursed energy at once. Some cursed tools can develop secondary effects, making them quite powerful, but those are few and far between. Cursed tools without an effect can be seen in use by Nanami, Meimei, and Kusakabe, whereas cursed tools with an effect can be seen used by Toji, Todo, and Maki. Another application for cursed energy is reverse cursed technique. Reverse cursed technique is a healing technique that uses positive energy to heal a person of their physical injuries. This is done by multiplying the negative energy of cursed energy against itself to create positive energy. It is notoriously hard to learn reverse cursed technique, as even someone like Gojo could not grasp it until he was literally on the brink of death. As far as we know, reverse cursed technique is capable of healing just about anything. We've seen it bring Gojo back from the brink of death, regrow limbs, and be used to bypass cursed technique burnout, although that last one is pretty risky. It's an incredibly powerful and useful tool that not many people have access to. There are also a few people that can output positive energy as if it was cursed energy. This allows them to heal others and also decimate cursed spirits, as spirits are extremely susceptible to positive energy. Understanding reverse curse technique instantly puts you in the upper echelon of sorcerers, much like the next application, Black Flash. A black flash occurs when a sorcerer applies their cursed energy within a trillionth of a second of a physical hit. When this is accomplished, their cursed energy flashes black, and the hit is equal to a normal hit to the power of 2.5. Raising strength to an exponent will make it hit exponentially hard. For instance, if an attack has a power of 10 and it is multiplied by 2.5, it will have an attack of 25. But if it is raised by 2.5, it will have an attack of over 300. That's all to say that a black flash is multitudes stronger than a regular hit. Landing a black flash takes an immense amount of skill, and there is no sorcerer on Earth who is capable of landing one at will. However, once one black flash is landed, the sorcerer enters the zone, where it seems easier to land black flashes, and the sorcerer also reaches 120% of their maximum potential. It is also implied later in the manga that black flashes can be used to restore a sorcerer's cursed energy pool, if multiple are landed, but this concept is still kind of undefined as of now. Another kind of undefined part of cursed energy is cursed energy attributes. This is when a sorcerer's cursed energy innately has an effect, like Hakari's, whose cursed energy has a rough feeling similar to sandpaper, making it hurt more to get hit by him, or Kashimo's, whose cursed energy has an electrical feeling that shocks and stuns opponents. Attributes like this seem to be completely random, but it's kind of hard to tell. Kashimo's is likely related to his cursed technique since he can control electricity, but Hakari is a walking casino, so I don't really understand how roughness relates to that. Regardless, these are the only two sorcerers that have cursed energy attributes, so it's a very underexplored part of cursed energy. We only have two more aspects of cursed energy to talk about before we can get into domains and techniques, and this one is binding vows, which are extremely important. A binding vow is an unbreakable agreement between a sorcerer and a sorcerer. This can be between a sorcerer and themselves, or a sorcerer and another sorcerer. When a sorcerer makes a binding vow with themselves, it is usually done to increase their power at the cost of a restriction. For instance, Nanami created overtime via a binding vow, which limits his cursed energy output during the day but gives him a much larger pool after hours. A binding vow is made with others if the sorcerer wants an unbreakable pact with someone for one reason or another. In general, breaking these binding vows is a much larger punishment than when you break one that is self-imposed. The last aspect of cursed energy worth mentioning is cursed energy reinforcement, which is when a sorcerer uses cursed energy to harden their body. For most, this is done subconsciously, and it's the reason that sorcerers can survive being thrown through buildings and take a much larger beating than regular people. But sorcerers can also focus their cursed energy on reinforcement if they anticipate a strong attack is headed their way. Capable sorcerers can also read an opponent's cursed energy flow to see what their next attack is going to be. But even more capable sorcerers can manipulate their cursed energy to such a high degree that it's almost impossible to read, or they can use it to create a bluff. The only exception to this in strong sorcerers is Yuta, who is overflowing with so much cursed energy that his moves are almost impossible to predict. Another time cursed energy can be read is when a cursed technique is being used. Right before a cursed technique is used, cursed energy wells up and creates an occurrence. This occurrence will give an indication of the strength of a cursed technique and potentially what the cursed technique actually is if the opposing sorcerer has already experienced it. What is a cursed technique? Well, a cursed technique is the application of cursed energy to an ability that was ingrained on a sorcerer's body at their birth. It is a gift bestowed on a sorcerer that they have very little say in. Some are completely broken and some are inconvenient. Regardless, they all aid in the life and job of a sorcerer, as many of them allow the sorcerer to fight much more effectively than they would be able to with just cursed energy. We can break cursed techniques into two categories: innate techniques and inherited techniques. Innate techniques are techniques that propagate at random in humans. There seems to be very little rhyme or reason behind who gets what abilities, with a couple of exceptions. These techniques tend to have a wider variety of strength than inherited techniques, and seem to be harder to master as well, as the person using them has no reference for what is possible with their technique. Inherited techniques are techniques that are passed down within the Jujutsu clans from one generation to another. This gives the new users a guidebook for their techniques, which can help them master it faster, but these techniques are also easier to dissect as an opponent can research the ability with already available information. As we already mentioned, cursed techniques are powered by cursed energy, but if you power a cursed technique with positive energy via reverse cursed technique, it creates a cursed technique reversal. From what we have seen, these appear to be direct opposites of the sorcerer's cursed technique. So when Gojo used blue with reverse cursed technique, it became red, which repelled opponents rather than attracting them. And when Kenjaku used the cursed technique reversal of anti-gravity system, it increased gravity in his immediate range. This implies that not every cursed technique has a cursed technique reversal, as not every technique has a direct opposite. Cursed technique reversals also take twice as much cursed energy to use compared to regular cursed techniques, but it's unclear if this makes them twice as strong as the base technique. There's also maximum techniques, which are the strongest possible applications of a technique aside from a domain. These are also referred to as supreme arts, and they essentially push a technique to its limit to do the most offensive damage possible. A few examples would be Maximum Uzumaki, Wing King, and Maximum Meteor. These are not to be confused with maximum outputs, which is when a sorcerer uses one of their techniques with their maximum cursed energy output. There are a couple of other ways to increase the strength of a cursed technique as well. The first one is by revealing one's hand. By explaining your technique to your opponent, you take on more risk in the fight, and as a result, the cursed technique you explain becomes stronger. We don't know exactly how much stronger, but it is significant enough that Sukuna did not want to explain his technique to Jogo to give him more of an even playing ground. A cursed technique can also be made more powerful via chanting, dance, and hand signs. Technically, these don't strengthen the technique that's used, but return it to its full strength, because omitting these factors makes the technique weaker. That's pretty much it for cursed techniques, so we're going to briefly touch on heavenly restrictions before finally getting into barriers and domains. Much like a cursed technique, a heavenly restriction is a blessing placed upon a sorcerer upon their birth, except these blessings tend to suck. Heavenly restrictions take an aspect away from someone in order to strengthen the opposite. Maki, the most prominent character with a heavenly restriction, had zero access to cursed energy, making her unable to use it for Jujutsu or even just seeing cursed spirits. But in exchange, she gained superhuman physical prowess, to the point that she was on par with decent first grade sorcerers, although this was likely in part due to her rigorous self-inflicted training. Mekamaru was the opposite. He had an enormous pool of cursed energy, but a body that could barely function. What's interesting about these restrictions is that it seems to be possible to break them in multiple ways. We see Mekamaru use Mahito's technique to fix his body, and we see Maki break free of her restriction by completely foregoing cursed energy. These two and Toji are the only characters that we see with a heavenly restriction, so they seem pretty rare, which makes sense as they did create some of the strongest characters in the series. And now we come to barriers. Barriers are basically walls made of Jujutsu. They're mostly used to trap someone inside of an area area or keep someone outside of an area, but they can be used to conceal things from non-sorcerers as well. This is called a curtain or a veil, and we see it a number of times early in the series to section off cursed spirits from the outside world so they can be dealt with. Physical barriers often require a peg wrapped in a talisman to construct, as creating a self-sustaining barrier is pretty much impossible. When a peg is destroyed, the barrier will be destroyed as well, but pegs do not have to be tied to a barrier. They can just exist and be a red herring for those trying to destroy the barrier. We see this done in Shibuya by Ogami and Kinjaku in order to disorient the sorcerers. In Shibuya, we also see that the strength of a barrier can be increased by increasing the risk associated with it. This is likely related to revealing one's hand, as increasing the risk also increased the power in that case as well. In addition to these physical barriers that require outside cursed energy to power, there are also barriers that are powered by sorcerers. These are called domains, and there are two main varieties: simple domains and domain expansions. But to understand a domain expansion, we have to understand a domain, and a domain is essentially a sorcerer's mental landscape that they are born with. It is what serves as the base of their cursed technique. When a domain is expanded, the sorcerer is essentially using cursed energy to expand the landscape of their mind past their brain, and then using a barrier to create a closed environment that is entirely their curse technique. Each domain requires a hand sign to activate, and that varies user to user. These domains also differ person to person, as they are dependent on the user's mentality and personality. If two sorcerers try to create domains at the same time, the more refined of the two will win out, and after a sorcerer uses their domain, they are unable to use their curse technique for a short period of time. It's under 4 minutes and 11 seconds in length, but we don't know the exact time. In this time, they can still use cursed energy in general, including reverse curse technique and anti-domain techniques like simple domain or falling blossom emotion, which we'll cover in a little bit. We can break all domains into two categories: lethal and non-lethal. Lethal domains are the much more common domain. They give the user enhanced combat capabilities by amplifying their technique and guaranteeing that any curse techniques used in the domain will hit. This is considered the sure hit effect or can't miss effect. Non-lethal domains are generally more unique. By making a domain non-lethal, it becomes easier to construct, trading power for utility, as everyone within the domain must follow a set of rules embedded in the curse technique. For some non-lethal domains, the domain itself is the curse technique of the person using it. So Hikari's technique is Idle Death Gamble, and Higuruma's technique is Deadly Sentencing. There are a couple of sorcerers that are capable of casting barrierless domains, which, as the domain implies, are domains that do not make use of the outer barrier. In both cases that we see, these are lethal domains that retain their sure hit effect despite not having an outer wall, and unfortunately right now we just don't know a ton about these domains. So let's move on to simple domains. Simple domains are categorized as anti-domain techniques, which is a technique that aims to let those trapped in a domain survive the sure hit effect. Simple domains mostly aim to buy time for the user, but even they can be dismantled in seconds if they are subject to a powerful domain. What makes a simple domain a bit more interesting is that they can be subject to different rules and binding vows set by the one who casts it. This allows the domain to have some offensive capabilities such as the Bato sword drawing and the new shadow style techniques, but even then it's kind of underwhelming. There are two more anti-domain techniques that have been showcased in Jujutsu Kaisen. The first is Falling Blossom Emotion, which shrouds the user in cursed energy that is capable of counterattacking a domain's guaranteed hit. This cursed energy is capable of adjusting its strength automatically in order to attack with force equal to the opposing force in order to nullify it. The other anti-domain technique we see is Hollow Wicker Basket. Not much is known about this one since it was only used like one time in the series, but it appears to neutralize a domain's barrier in order to prevent the guaranteed hit. Because it only targets the barrier, it cannot nullify the curse technique within the domain itself, making it useless against incomplete domains and non-lethal domains as well. And I think that's everything. Let me know if I missed anything major in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you Saturday for another one.